Okay, awesome. All right. Hey, everyone. Thank you for showing up this late in the semester. I appreciate that you're hanging out during this week. I'm going to try to make it as informative, but not overwhelming. So I always try to stay under 10 slides and just kind of pack things to ponder as a group because everyone's going to have their own interpretation. But I wanted to include like a toolkit of things that we've been working really hard through. And so for anyone who's taken the courses, just going to do a little share screen and go over the areas that we focus on. Okay, so I'm going to do the view present. Nope. Present. Okay. How's that look for everyone in terms of like the size? All right. So few of you might remember, these are our categories. Since you've taken the course with us, we have done a pretty significant revision. Not so much on the content. The content is still there. We've just elaborated on some things that have just kind of come up more naturally in our conversations. So if you want, I can walk you through our new version of the course at the end or, anytime you want. It's in Canvas Commons. And I have added a link to it in our final slide. So there's a few helpful links in this presentation. The other link is going to go to a folder full of helpful templates. And I believe there's also, yes, a document that walks you through the course review process. Just kind of like helpful emails to send, when to send them, things to keep in mind. So because every college does things differently, for example, one campus might go through their help desk to connect someone as an observer. We've found that we do it that way, but other campuses go through their DE coordinator. So things like that are more nuanced, that's going to be up to you, but I just want to show you like the main points to be mindful of as you're working on scaling this work. So yeah, these are our categories, E1 through E8. And for anyone who may or may not be getting involved in the POCR process, the CVC OEI work, if you are doing that work, one of the big lessons that we have discovered is the faster that you can openly make that connection and think about like parallel work in distance education at your campus, the easier it's going to be for you to be supported continuously. So think DE like Optimus Prime. And so, if you can think about like other people or other work you've done that corresponds to this, and, we just kind of had a brainstorming session this morning, and it occurred to us that perhaps we could make use of professional development funding for course alignment. And, just think of things that are already existing. And that's going to happen in terms of like your faculty's specialties and like expertise, but think of it also in terms of like the district and your campus. So we're not going to jump right into the new revision. I'm just going to go over like next steps in community building. And so we'll talk about that. And then we'll go through the course and think about like how you might personalize it for WCC, for example. And I'll kind of leave you with that so that your dialogue can start forming and you can start thinking about who you'd like on your team and who might be great candidates for taking your first OET session. So those are always really fun conversations. And I like kind of like being not involved in that because that's all about your experience and, who you think would be great. Only you can know that. So the main points that I've picked up, I've been involved with them for about a year and a half. And before that, I was recommended by my dean at the time. And the dean and I had worked on a couple of different projects together. One very closely, we had a Fab Lab initiative, and I was the instructor in residence, and she really showed me how to do everything from the program review for continued funding to being there every day and kind of learning about what they did and trying out some of the things. So it was very thorough. And she thought that I'd be interested in this work. I'd also done open education resources. So she kind of knew that I gravitated towards stuff like this and that I was able to do the administrative stuff also. I think that's an important detail, to be organized and also ambitious about what your campus can achieve. So I was a little nervous because I knew that the group was in existence before me and they'd been working together for a couple of years. So me and maybe one or two other people came in new, and the rest of the people were fairly fluent in the work and had been working together for a while. So what I noticed right off the bat is, unlike some previous experiences at other employers, maybe other campuses, the non-hierarchical model totally came through in this work group. So I got the sense that they practiced what they studied and that they were naturally interested in this work. So, no one got voluntold to be on it. People were emotionally connected to it. People found it meaningful in their work. And I felt like the things that I had to say on day one at our first meeting were taken with great care. And people really helped me get into the fold. So I really appreciated that. And over the past year and a half, I would say that my biggest impression that I've left with for the group is that they encourage leadership throughout the group. So, for instance, I'm the coordinator this semester. I won't be next semester because I want to open space up for someone else. And last year, Chelsea was our coordinator, and so Inger, she's also she started doing this work when she was on a sabbatical. And so she started doing research on equity, and she and the DE team came up with the rubric together, and it's just sort of evolved since then. But that's something I really appreciate, especially as a person who has done their fair share of professional service, and as a person who is a part-time faculty. There were no politics when it came to every member of the group, and I really respected that. And for me, it let me know that the way that we were going to express the work was going to definitely also be embodied in our dialogues and our interactions. For me, that's super important. So I would say that I have genuine admiration for my faculty, and I know their work a little bit better. We share articles, we share PDFs that we find might be helpful to help someone in a leadership role or with an assignment that they're kind of grappling with. So it's very useful and very supportive. So I encourage you to kind of figure out what you think of as a non-hierarchical model that is equitable in a work group. And to have that first before you put your call out for people and before you interview, it'll really help. It'll really help to ensure that the work is appreciated and completed, and that it's expressed with like respect. Because I think that what we practice is that culturally responsive approach. And lately I've been kind of thinking to myself, something like that in mind is really important in the beginning. So yeah, getting to know your co-facilitators, rotating your roles, letting other people learn the ropes and kind of figure out an area a little bit more is great. And it's also great professional development. I myself have, over the past year and a half, I have also added a consulting practice. And every single time that I'm helping to facilitate a discussion or figure out how to help this organization with their cultural shift, I think about this work. So it's wonderful professional development, whether you're interested in trying a new career out, or maybe you just want to apply it more to your teaching and think more about how can I facilitate better discussion threads. So it's really high impact in that way. The second point is I've learned so much about the importance of documentation for scaling. We're always talking about it. I did a little bit of work with guided pathways, and it was the first time I learned about scaling documents and how to actually articulate how that stuff works. So when we were thinking about this project, we thought a lot about data collection early on. So find out who your data collection expert is, talk to them about the kinds of things that you hope can be measured, and figure out if it's realistic. And so that first cohort that you're going to have of the online equity training course is going to be super insightful, and you're going to want to stay with them for a few semesters and measure, how has the retention changed? Has it gone up? Has it gone down? What kind of feedback are they getting about the activities? Are more activities being completed across the board? Are they sensing that students are, understanding the instructions and feeling as if they can ask for kind of a co-author role? That's something I've started doing too, is approaching students as co-authors and inviting them to help me edit materials such as instructions. So, all of that data is super important, and it does help measure whether this is actually supporting students and giving them a sense of being engaged in their education. So having a good collection plan is awesome, and it's something that should be prioritized in the beginning. As far as course reviews and badging, those are some of the most important deliverables in this work. So right off the bat, you want to think about, okay, how can I make the process of taking the course and then aligning my course or a person's course more explicit? Because sometimes unintentionally, someone can take the course in the spring and then the summer happens and it's like we all forget and we move on to other projects, right? So it can make it difficult for people to come back in the fall and then align their courses on top of their existing responsibilities. So that's one of those things where we've kind of had to assess every year and kind of figure out our workflow. So it might be different for you, but for example, we learned that we were underutilizing the summer as a term that we could consider, time to work and time to get some of this stuff done. And this year we noticed that for 2 summers in a row, we've had very high enrollment from faculty, definitely reaching and going beyond the 20 faculty limit that we had set in the summer. Whereas in the spring, it wasn't quite happening. And so we decided that instead of trying to over-manage that trend or that tendency, we would just kind of embrace it and say, you know what, summer is just better for faculty to take something like this, because it does require, for some people, 5 hours a week, others about 10. So it is a fair amount of dedication for time. So that's something that we've kind of figured out. But yeah, these are lessons that we kind of learn over, what's been a challenge, what isn't working this semester, where could we make it work, yeah, so figure out your calendar your first year and figure out, when people may be more busy or when they may be more available. So, that may be different for you, but that's kind of what we learned this year. Also, in the beginning, I think we threw a lot of LTIs into our course design, and we found that that took up so much time in troubleshooting, even for us. When we had faculty asking us questions and struggling with the LTIs, we knew that we had to call a timeout and reconsider the role of LTIs in our course design. And then, as a result, we reconsidered how we designed our own courses and how students were possibly avoiding assignments that had LTIs or spending way too much time on them. So it's been really insightful because we really do dissect every single module and every single thing that we put into that course. Okay. So that's my spiel for the big picture. What I think is a really good next step is that now that a few people have taken the online equity training, it's good to start thinking about what does equity look like at Woodland Community College. So going there and then thinking about how's it looking in my courses. So I want to invite you all to either type or raise your hand, unmute, and talk about that. If you've taken the course, what were some things that you kind of had like an aha moment or a connection? And have you delivered that to your course and kind of maintained it? Like, how's it going, basically? And then if you haven't taken the course, what are some things that you can share about how you try to practice equity in your courses? And, especially in light of this past year, I've definitely changed a few things up. So I wouldn't be surprised if you all had it also. So I'll mute myself, and feel free to type or unmute anything that you feel comfortable with.
Hey all, this is Kevin. I teach English at Woodland, and one of the things that I did after I took this equity training is I changed the final project in just about all of my online classes. Originally, I had a writing assignment that was fairly narrow and specific, and I essentially did away with that, and I opened it up to more of a response to any of the readings throughout the course. And so what I did is I asked them to give me a personal response, take details from the text, so it still pertains to the text, and I gave them a wide variety of options as to how to respond. Some of the suggestions that I gave, I got from the training were like they could make a video of themselves, obviously. They could do a presentation, a slideshow. One of the options was to create an art project around the literary work and talk about that. I said they could do a blog, they could do a TED Talk, they could convince other people why the work is important or relevant or culturally speaks to us today, because a lot of the works are much older. And I actually had a lot of really nice responses in a lot of different formats. And one that stood out to me, I'll just bring up right now, is that one of my students, we read Hamlet in my English 1B, and one of the students made an art project where they were in a bunch of art classes, and they did paintings of all of the characters, or all the main characters in Hamlet, and talked about them. And it was kind of a modern interpretation, but it was really nice. Um, Hamlet himself was holding a skull of Yorick, and one of them wearing all black, and it was really nice. That's the one that stood out to me. But Ophelia looking sad and distraught was another really good one, about to kill herself. So there's a lot of potential there, and I really liked it because the student just reacted based on their own interpretation of the play. Obviously, looking at all the things we talked about, but it had a nice personal touch, and I appreciated that. So anyway, thank you for the training, and it really helped me with my final project. And I'm going to try and work to incorporate more ideas like that allow for more student expression throughout the course itself, because right now my course is fairly discussion board heavy, and I'm trying to find options that will allow for more creative expression as opposed to the written discussion boards.
That's awesome. Oh, I see a chat. Betsy says, in our online course template, I added an example of a meet and greet with QDL. In helping faculty to adopt OER, we incorporated more diverse images. Oh, cool. Yeah. Diverse images is like such a hot topic right now. And I have found some really great collections. There's Facebook groups for like anti-racist teaching, and I'm a member of a couple of those. And they just they have Google folders full of this stuff. And I think At One has a pretty good page dedicated to them. So that's really important. I realized how much I didn't think about my images in my courses. And, as much as I talked about how art history is in need of better representation, when I looked at my course shell, it just wasn't there. And when I would show artworks, I would be a little lazy and just insert the images that were provided by the chapters. and or like the first image in the chapter, and I realized that there was a pattern, and unless it was a book specifically about, say, African art, it wasn't going to be very inclusive or demonstrative of like the population that was taking my course. And it's so important to have representational justice. It's a new term I learned this past year, but there's a name for it. There's a name for when you're sitting in a class and you see yourself reflected, or a possible like aspirational place for you, you know? And so many disciplines, I talk to people in math, for example, and I bring that question up, and they're like, yeah, so many of the, you know, the research points to a very small population as far as like the creators and the theorists, but there's so much proof that, you know, in terms of like ancient developments and all that stuff and global developments, that there was simultaneous development of very similar findings. And so it's really interesting how it shows itself in your discipline. So I think that's awesome. I think when I started really understanding UDL, it connected so much to images and representation, and they kind of went hand in hand. Mhm. Yeah, that's awesome. So, you know, one of the things I learned too is even in really small gestures, it helps to get your students to stay in touch. So I learned actually how to better facilitate a Zoom meeting when we talked about how, you know, just like we have faculty members that are just more extroverted and love to kind of talk out their ideas. Sometimes the quieter faculty who may have also great ideas don't chime in as much. And translating that into a course that can have some pretty negative impacts for students. And so we kind of, I think through working in this work group and thinking about things like that, I started thinking about the students that don't speak up and don't raise their hands almost like just as much as the students who are very vocal. And you know, that translated into, okay, well, if I'm doing something that's helpful to a student, I need to record it and share it with the whole class, because the student that didn't ask me for help may also benefit from it. So I just kind of more naturally started thinking in those terms of how can I communicate an answer in a more like universal way, you know? So um yeah, I feel like I'm a little bit more mindful of that. Yeah, so even a Zoom discussion can kind of have a makeover through doing this work, and slowing down to even teach students how to do, letting them try out the emojis and the hearts and everything. And it's pretty cool to see students actually doing it while you're doing a lecture. It's very motivating to see like the laughing face or the heart emoji when you tell like a horrible joke or make an observation. And so I got a lot back from that too, because, you know, I think blank screen, talking to nothing but a bunch of blank screens. If it's the case, sometimes even like a little emoji will show that they're listening and that they're engaged, you know? They might just not want to show you where they are, or they might be shy, might take them a while. But I think that little things like that are really clever and also really sensitive. So I find that like I've become a little bit more sensitive in terms of like what it's like for students who aren't really as extroverted. Yeah, so if you want to take it an extra step, you can also practice by assigning roles to students, letting someone be a timer, letting someone be a co-host, and unraising and raising hands. So those are all things that you can do to establish a sense of community and shared responsibility. And if you translate that to like a group project, it helps you to manage the group projects so much better. And I'm happy to share a recording of a workshop I did on group projects. It's about an hour long, and it talks about all of the ins and outs of getting over the fear of group projects. So I can definitely elaborate on that virtually. Um, so Gonna move on to the next one. All right, so for anyone that's curious, if you're talking to people and they have questions about, how can I fit this into what I already do? I do so much. I'm doing professional development. They may be involved in another distance education initiative. A lot of faculty have had to, in a really short amount of time, become active as online educators. And so it's one of those times where you may run into faculty who already feel overloaded. And, how do we encourage them to try this? And so again, it's going to be one of those questions of what would be the incentive? We need to ask them, like, would it be an incentive for faculty if they got a stipend for taking the course and aligning the course? How can we make that happen? Right now, our work group is, we're doing grant research to find out if we can get another grant. A lot of our early work was funded through a grant, and it was a lifesaver. It helped us to establish a lot of the documents, train our faculty, and do things like give people stipends. So thinking about that incentive, making sure that you're being equitable to your faculty and compensating them for their work. In the long run, it's going to set a really great model. And, the administration, if they see a lot of people supporting this, they're going to be more likely to find ways to fund it. So, always think about that. Think about the work it takes not only for your work group, but for the faculty who are designing a course, sometimes from scratch. Okay, so there are about 8 models. We've recently revised it to go from 5 weeks to 4. And we've kind of redesigned it so that it's a little bit more streamlined in terms of the discussion threads. So if you were to peek at it, you'll see that now it's, in terms of the assignments and the modules, there's one discussion. The instructions we think are a lot more clear. And we've practiced what we preached in UDL, and we've added more links to help faculty find the resources that they need. Because part of the work that we do is we offer a class, like a sample class, for you to look at and to assess in terms of the rubric. And so that's a great exercise. But we found that sometimes people had a hard time finding that course. So we've taken a lot of feedback, and we've kind of tried to emulate the rubric better in our course design. So yeah, for anyone that is thinking of taking it, they have the brand new revision. So hopefully that'll be even more encouraging, just making sure they all get through it and feel like they're given everything they need to succeed. Okay, so one of the questions that we get is, what do we need to know or do before we take this? Because it's something that they haven't heard of before, or that's not connected to something in existence. We just assure them, if you have some knowledge of Canvas, if you've taken an intro course, you're good. And let's see.
I think Maria froze. Oh, okay. Oh, there she is.
Okay, we're all still here. Good, great. Sorry, I was saying both of your examples are so good in the chat. Would you mind just kind of talking about them a little bit? Because I do remember your work in the courses, and one of the things we really thought was outstanding is that A, you all already seemed really connected and like you had an existing dialogue, and B, the quality of your work was so inventive and creative. So yeah, go ahead and tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I teach statistics, so I think it's easy to develop things that can can span a lot of different areas. And so for the images, just setting up for the discussion thread for the week, do a Google image search or do an image search for, say, accountant. And then the students would report out of the first 30 images that came up, say the number of female or images, and then they could test that versus the 52% general population. So we could make it into a statistical test. So started out with that and then moved it into people coming up with their own ideas for searches. And for them to experience just the representation of images that you had in the equity rubric course, so they could witness that for themselves and then discuss it amongst themselves. Another thing we did was with the implicit bias. I had them do a couple of the Harvard implicit bias tests, and then they confidentially reported their results, and we were able to kind of as a class look at the relationship between the transgender IAT and the race IAT, and they chose those two implicit association tests on their own. So the course at least sparked a lot of ideas for projects because these are some of the things that the students could could themselves learn about as they went through stats.
I just said, wow, like that. I wouldn't have even have thought that, yeah, the nature of searching and algorithms could be discussed in that lens. But that is just so amazing. And one day, once we get our library together, we want to have examples like that in our library. Like I think that we're going to be revising it in the fall. So y'all might get an email and ask if we can kind of copy a page that embodies your assignment, because that is just like exemplary. And it would not occur to anybody that something like math, when I think about math, I think about the art history movement, minimalism. Um, they, in minimalism, a lot of the artists proclaimed no bias, no inherent bias. They proclaimed that minimalism was free of inherent messages, inherent agendas, and therefore was like kind of like perfectly neutral. And of course, we all know that's impossible. For example, it was a largely, European male community. It wasn't very like, they didn't really demonstrate inclusivity. So there was a bias. There was an unconscious bias. Anyhow, like that connects me to how some people think of math, but it's really not true. There is like a history of representation, and even in like the hidden roles of math that we have in our daily life, it might not be the cause of a bias or the cause of any like stereotyping, but it can be a part of the delivery, and that's kind of a wild idea. And also, Halsey, your example is really great because so much of what we struggle with is, hey guys, you have access to this wonderful library full of these well-trained librarians who are going to show you how to do an awesome academic search. Please don't Google. Please don't Google mindlessly. At least use Google Scholar and focus your search. That's why you do a focused search, because sometimes, and especially for representing those historically marginalized communities, not minorities, because it also matters how we talk about something. Something is not inherently a minority, it's historically marginalized or historically excluded. Um, yeah, that happens on the internet. The internet is not this like autonomous, benign thing, and I think that's such great knowledge to share with students, because we just don't think about those things until someone places it in front of us and helps us to connect it. So, I mean, I think that's like the spirit of education. Let's see. Oh, another great comment, but now it's missing. Was it you, Greg?
Yes, it was. And I'm sorry I can't have my camera on. I've got a pretty weak, wonky connection as it is. And if I put it on for all of like a few seconds, I lose the meeting. I found this out the hard way with classes over the semester in the fall. Um, I teach a variety of health classes, and nearest and dearest to my heart are the nutrition classes that I teach. I had, for now the better part of 25 years, a project that I've done in all the classes, but one in particular, that was always from the student's perspective. So they would collect their own dietary data, they would analyze those data, and then they would write about those data. Um, I asked them to do some, what I thought was pretty good critical thinking with that. It occurred to me after, I think midway through is where I got with this class, but it occurred to me that a substantial change that I could make that I think and would be very meaningful. And the feedback I'm getting so far, because I've only done it this semester, has been really positive. But instead of it being just from the student's perspective, it's now a group project. So working in small groups. And instead of just collecting their own individual data, what they do, which they still do, on each other, but I also ask them then to assume a different ethnicity. So instead of it's another white guy or another white woman overlaying what she or he would ordinarily do, I ask them to pick, say, of a Native American. And so given their diet as it is, and they were making, say, dietary adjustments, what would those look like for a person who is a Native American and potentially, say, Navajo versus someone who is an Indian American or a Pakistani American or an Egyptian American and so forth. So I'm asking them to do even some different critical thinking. What I've found with this too is that talking with a couple of dietitian friends of mine is they had never thought about that in so much that their perspective is always a function of what they've been trained, what they know to do, and it's always really from a very limited cultural and ethnic perspective. So hopefully this is broadening that. And we'll see. But so far, the feedback I've been getting has been very positive. It was something that just they didn't initially know what to do with. And toward the middle and end of the semester, it was coming together quite nicely. The other thing I've done is to put in a whole piece now pertaining to technology inequity and equities. And I had never had that. I sort of touched on it, but I never really had it per se. And now addressing a variety of issues with respect to systems, connections, connectivity, and again, the feedback I've gotten on that has also been very helpful. So, and again, this is only the first semester I've had that in after quite a few semesters of doing online classes. So we'll see how that plays out as well.
That's awesome. I always kind of believe that it takes at least 2 semesters to fully embody an idea that you want to incorporate into your course, whether it's pedagogy or just a habit of yours in language. It takes a little bit. So sounds like you're on the right track. Yeah. So I mean, this slide here, I would definitely recommend to anybody who is concerned that it's too much for them. And you know, the Canvas Commons course, it can be tailored, and you are more than welcome to take some parts out or adjust some parts that you think still meet the objectives and kind of correspond to what you've learned. So you might take a discussion out one week or something, or change the nature of how people respond to it. And so be flexible for yourselves, just like you're flexible for your students. That's something that we don't do as educators. And this experience in the past year and a half has actually really it's pushed me to ask myself questions like that. Like, am I having all of that, as Greg mentioned, all of that training in grad school and undergrad and high school that came from who knows where about what it is to be a good student and what it is to be a good educator, and what is a good education or the preferred education. Are those things that like resonate with me and that I actually agree with? Or are there ways that I can kind of insert my own critique or my own, thoughts about what should be included? And, part of that is also like, especially during this past year, is taking it easy when you can, so I've started working in my course design to include like rest weeks for myself and my students. And collectively, it's beneficial for everybody. And you don't know how hard it was for me to give myself permission to do that. I really sat down and thought about, okay, why do I think that I have to be super productive all the time? Even though I can't really say why I assign a discussion thread every week, I just feel like I have to. And what I actually learned is that, if I just really refine my final project and instead of assigning one discussion every week for 16 weeks, how about I do a discussion thread every 4 weeks and it's focused on one skill that goes into the final project? It all connects. It's so much more clarifying. So yeah, I feel like that was really important for me as an instructor. And I kind of said no to the capitalist model of work. And I think that's been a really important conversation, like socially all over, because during the pandemic, we have been faced with, I don't know about you, but I feel like my work went up and that it was really hard for me. The boundary between work and my life was very nebulous. And so I had to really sit down and think about, what can I do without that is just something that's like a capitalist model, and what is essential, what is like super, like what is the principle that I'm trying to get at? And yeah, I think that's an important conversation too, because you're going to have to address that. We're coming out of the pandemic, and burnout's a real thing. Feeling appreciated is a real thing. And so this is the kind of work that invites conversations like that. And I feel like I hate to use the word buy-in, but you'll just get more people that'll want to try this if they feel like it's that kind of a space, which it should be. I share, not that it's a part of the work, but as a result of having these dialogues with my fellow faculty, I feel like my work group is a small group. It's about 7 people, but they're the people that I share my real, like what's really going on with me. And so we can all say, I'm going to have my camera off today because I'm super burnt out and I'm struggling with something. And, like as educators, those spaces are super important and valuable. And the more pockets that you can create in your district that offer that, the better that people are going to feel, and the work's just going to be more awesome. I mean, I feel like my work's gotten a lot better, as far as like putting what I say I believe in into practice. And so it's a range. I put more of my own personality into classes. I share more about myself, what I feel is like appropriate, because I have a lot of students that do that. Like when we get into diversity and representation, like I have a lot of students who talk about being like non-gender conformative. So we talk about that. We talk about concepts of gender and identity. And I feel free to share about my identity. And, I just wasn't brought up that way. I wasn't brought up that you bring yourself into your institution. So it's been really insightful for me, as well as like for how I understand my students. So I have about 15 minutes. I want to get to the most important part. This is actually what I've spent most of my time on. Here's an image of like how our modules look now. So they're very cleaned up.
Marie, I'm sorry, you're not sharing your screen.
Oh, hold on one sec.
Thanks.
Oh, it must have gone out when like it went away. Okay, so yeah, here is our screen. And just to go back a little bit, this is the screen I was on. So I definitely recommend these 2 points being stressed for anyone who's interested in either being an equity trainer or taking the course. And so we encourage like people who have taken the course to be equity trainers, but keep in mind, it is not required. If you just know somebody who's fantastic and already kind of thinks along these lines and you think they would really be a great facilitator, yeah, don't let the fact that they haven't taken the course stop you. Okay, so here's kind of the new design. It's a little bit more clear, a little bit more straightforward, and I think it kind of models how we try to work together. I want to especially point out, I just figured out how to do this. This is so cool. My little red dot. So here, this is especially important, an instructor spotlight. Make sure to showcase what you're learning and build that into your course design. And of course, you're welcome to use our videos, but over time, make it your own and make sure to incorporate people at your campus and that really like get the work. And here are 2 discussions, so analysis. And then one thing that we learned is that because faculty can sometimes feel like they're building everything from scratch online, we want to facilitate as much like creation while they're taking the course as possible. So the build is the part where, okay, when you finish this course, you get these things done. These are your deliverables that you can put right into your sandbox. And, hopefully they are general enough that maybe you can use them across courses, so if it helps, try to kind of encourage that. Try to encourage them to think about, when you design your assignments, how could you write them so that it wouldn't take a lot of work to do this in another course? Because course creation, some people love it. I love it. I'm super getting into like HTML right now. Some people don't, and they just want a template that works. So you need to be able to go that range. And so hopefully our new course design helps with that. All right, so these are the things that I want to share with you the most. You have a folder, and so if you can test out these links, I'm going to drop a link into the chat. Okay. So here's our link for the course as it is now. So link to course, and let me know if this works for you. This is a folder I've created, and it's connected to the previous folder from the fall where I shared some sample syllabus documents. So now it's got a few more templates for you, and go back. That link I need to fix because it looks like it's just going into the presentation. But here's an example of one of the templates in there. So here is like a course review document. And for anyone, that wants to know more about the course review stuff, that I can share some samples about. But it's about a 10-hour process. And this document is a good starter document for maybe things to be mindful of. Everything from how to advertise your OET to starting the course review process. Once someone has finished it, just a sample email to gauge if they're interested. And then examples of like how to do it. Do they go through the help desk, or do you prefer that they contact the DE coordinator on campus? That's all up to you. But I created this for our work group because I wanted to have uniform language. And I wanted everyone to understand the process so that if anyone asked them, they could explain it right there on the spot. And so I tried to break it down to the most basic steps. And yeah, so here's some additional resources. Accessibility is becoming increasingly like a high priority in all DE efforts. So for anyone that feels a little bit intimidated by that or wants to have a little guidance, this set of links is a really good start. And finally, when they are aligned, we use Badger. So we designed a badge, and we make sure to put this language into the little narrative box. And we also send them an email because we learned that our email system sends Badger stuff to spam automatically for that first email. So we've kind of learned to anticipate things like that. So that is in our email notification that we send to them after we send the badge. So this is pretty thorough. I think it's like a good way to start the process. And let's see. Let me go ahead and stop my share, and I will fix that link for the folder. In the meanwhile, I just want to open it up to any questions that you might have.
I guess I have a question for Halsey and Greg. Kevin had to jump off here, but you know, what would you like our next steps to be? I do feel like next year, because of all this funding that's just kind of flowing right now, might be a good time. I could approach our VP or one of our deans to see if there's professional development funding to support moving forward. Greg and I technically didn't finish the course, but we got pretty far.
That's
Right,
okay.
right.
That's okay. As long as
Right.
like you feel confident that you could
Yeah.
facilitate it, which I totally think you can.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess so. So I guess my question is, does it make sense for the next step? I could approach administration, see if there's any funding or interest in funding. And if so, then I can also start the conversation with our institutional researcher, because we could talk about what the data would be, right, that we would want to collect. Okay, Greg's on board with that. And then when we come back in fall, we can have a meeting, you know, just a Zoom kind of thing, and debrief each other where we are, and we can kind of decide as a group, because I don't want to dictate anything. Those are two steps I could take. I'm going to get the ball rolling, and then we can figure out from there where to go. Does that sound okay? Okay, great.
That sounds good.
Okay, so then I'm going to put down my
To get through
list.
the other half of it that I wasn't able to wrap up.
You know, Greg, that I have 1 week left to go. Maybe you and I could open it up and we can hobble through together. Or what we could do is bring in a copy of this new one, and we can just kind of, you know, work through it on our own, sort of thing.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
because we still have the old one. We can look back. I did look at Halsey, and Kevin had great work. So, but I have to say, Maria, even though I didn't finish it, I mean, obviously Greg's already applying. It's helped me tremendously, because I'm a instructional designer. It's helped me tremendously. As it's touched like 20 courses at least, you know what I mean? So in some way, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, that's 20 potential courses that you can align. And
Yeah.
are you all do you participate in the CVC OEI consortium?
Yeah, so actually Halsey and I are both reviewers for poker as well.
So one of the things that, so I fixed the link in your presentation for the WCC folder. The link's in the chat. If you open that link, you're going to see a suite of materials. Here, I'll do my screen share and kind of walk you through them. There we go. Do you see the option that says sample syllabi May 2021 presentation, the two folders right here?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is from the fall, the sample syllabi. So for anyone who just wants to get a head start on that, see, it's kind of the most time-consuming detail in the beginning when taking the course. This is the presentation folder that's going to include your toolkit and next steps. So what you're talking about, the administrative collaboration and seeing where there's parallel efforts, that's exactly what we just talked about this morning. So what I did is I kind of edited our spring report to the Vice Chancellor, and I created kind of a template for you here. And it just gives you an example of how we're kind of trying to really push for that district-wide support, and seeing where there are like interlocking pieces, like, you know, awesome idea to think about professional development funds. They go fast, so you really have to think about your timing. One of the things that we talked about is, hey, since we just figured out that we're going to offer 2 sessions in the summer, why don't we strike while the iron is hot, and right after that session's over, the first week of August, why don't we send out an email announcing that there are, you know, 10 $500 stipends available through professional development funding. You know, with the permission of the PD coordinator, we have to have that conversation. But that's our vision, is to get, you know, get an agreement that they'll fund 10 or, you know, something, course alignments, and say, hey, you just finished this course, get your applications in, and align your course and receive a stipend. So we want to just really be smart about what's already there instead of just asking for a bunch of new stuff, because that can be a challenge too. And with the poker initiative, poker is more time consuming. I've learned from people who are kind of going through it right now. And they are, all the faculty that tend to gravitate towards online equity training also gravitate to poker. So you've kind of have a built-in audience, but how does it work that they're not fighting each other? What we've decided to do is articulate that we want to be more explicitly like a liaison to the poker process, because we talked to the DE committee and the leads on that, and we realized that they're already including the online equity rubric in their poker process for the course review. So why not make that a stronger thing and have us be kind of, you know, consulting on that and helping them where we can. It also, what it does is it ensures that we get some course align completed also, instead of just having them steal them all away from us. So, you know, again, instead of fighting or managing, over managing a challenge, just embrace it and find a way to make it work. That's always been our motto. Yeah, CARES funding. Oh, that's awesome. So here I'm going to show you a little bit of our language in our spring report. It might inspire some ideas. So what we did is we just broke it down into 3 sections. So this past spring, we noted accomplishments, we noted challenges, and goals. So under the goals section, I think is where you'll see a lot of like potential for figuring out where WCC has some openings for collaboration. One thing that we realized is, I don't know if you do this, but our campus and our district, each campus has a set of 2 or 3 distance education coaches. And we offer like office hours where people can just drop in and ask questions about Canvas or online teaching. And we realize that as the semester goes on, we have less people coming in. And that's a funded thing. So why not actually directly connect the DE coaches and direct our faculty that are taking poker and OET and say, hey, if you need some help or if you need to carve out time for designing your courses, go here at this time. And it just makes sense because 2 of the people that are DE coaches at my campus are involved in online equity training. You know, again, the same people tend to be involved in the same things. So find out who those people are and, you know, make those connections explicit so that you're using things that are already funded and it's just more efficient, you know. So things like that can also be really helpful, is thinking about where can we fit in that exists. Another thing we proposed is that in exchange for some of our trainers training in poker, some of the poker leads would take the OET course. And so that was a really great exchange. And it helped us to fill up the class. It helps for people to trust to take the course, because these are really like, you know, they're very trusted, they're very insightful people at their campus. So that helps too with institutionalizing. Yeah. So yeah, here's an example of like a sample academic like calendar year. And I also added a sample email to the administrator. So we do kind of like an end of semester thing. And So I added the calendar so she could see that right away. And we also invite her for a final end of semester meeting. After final grades are turned in, we just kind of have a recap of our last OET session, and we showcase like great work from faculty, and we invite her to sit in. And the last time we did that, our funding got increased. So it's always a great move. And we think that she really connected to what we were talking about. And so having something like that where you can like showcase the work and the course and kind of walk through assignments just like we did today is awesome for connecting with administrators that might not know exactly if they're into it. So it's a great strategy. Betsy?
Has there been any discussion with the CVC of maybe you could be badged, the badge would show up in that CVC exchange? You know how if you're quality aligned, you have a little extra movement in the.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Actually, someone on our campus asked about that. As far as I know, we haven't uploaded like our courses. And so we need to do that. But when we do that, we're going to really push.
Okay.
Because I don't know if the poker badge is going to be showing up. Do you know that?
Yeah, it will. Yeah, once your campus is normed with the CVC,
Mhm.
anything that passes locally is supposedly going to get that badge. I think they still have to look at it, but it's more streamlined.
Yeah.
So what I was hoping, it would be great, even if not, it maybe in our course schedule, I could advocate locally that we can put a badge,
Mhm.
you know, something in the schedule that would say this is an equity aligned course or something like that.
That's a great point. I'm going to bring that up at our next meeting. We're meeting again June 21st. But also that raises the point of since we already have a badge that we've created, maybe we can share the badge somehow with you through Badger so you don't have to recreate the wheel, and so that that badge is like universal on the consortium page. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'll add that as a point. But yeah, I've also added a sample facilitation guide so that when you do lead the OET course, this is a great week by week checklist. And, you know, combined with the facilitation guide and like a weekly recap meeting for every set of modules, that's really the bulk of what we did. The grading wasn't so bad. We did have some back and forth on whether we were really walking the walk with our extension policy. Some people were really all about the extension policy, but other people were like, no, I mean, I don't know. So that's really up to you too. Your group philosophy on how you teach the course is going to be the product of those back and forths. And so that's always the fun part of figuring out who teaches and how they teach and all that. Yeah, but hopefully this folder will be a good starting like toolkit for you, and you're so more than welcome to reach out to me if you have any questions. I will be pretty active with the group through early August, and then I won't be the coordinator, but you can definitely reach out to Chelsea and Inger, and they will be still pretty active in the group. And Didum will be the DE coordinator, so she will definitely be engaged with the work. But yeah, I'll be supportive, but just from afar, just taking some downtime. Still love the work.
Maria, I have one more question. When I look at the folder, I just have the syllabus template folder. I don't have the second. I'm not seeing this presentation one, I think.
Yeah, okay. Let me fix that. Share.
Okay, thanks. Yes, Greg, I'm seeing Greg's message. Yes, Greg, I will email you. Yes.
Thanks, Greg, for coming. It was great chatting.
Thank you all. Great presentation. Thank you.
Greg and Halsey, do you need flex credit? You still have, I can still give you a certificate if you need an hour of flex credit. You're good.
If I don't know, but as a just in case.
Sure, I'll send you one, Greg. Okay, Halsey, you're okay.
Thank you.
Right, sure.
Thank you. Okay, thank you all. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you too.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, let me see if I can adjust this setting, and let me know if it shows up now. Go ahead and refresh.
Okay.
If not, I can fix it by just dropping it into the sample syllabus folder, because that one you do have permission to, right?
Oh, yes, I have it now. Thank you.
Okay,
Perfect.
cool. Yeah, so hopefully that is kind of a well-rounded set of documents to get you all started. But yeah, like I said, feel free to reach out anytime. I'm free through early August, and then after that, Chelsea, Inger, and Didum.
Great. Thank you, Maria.
Yeah, it's good to check in with you and see that you're
Fantastic.
moving along.
Yeah.
That's
thank you.
rad. That's awesome. Well, let me know what happens and what the good news is. I'm honestly excited to hear that you feel really confident about like funding being available. You know, that's really the biggest battle. And once you have that support, the rest is like most